The first police officer who entered the house on Elmhurst Street would never forget what he saw. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and something else. Something that smelled faintly like old perfume and decay. His flashlight swept across the room and froze. There were people, no, not people, figures standing perfectly still. A woman in a red dress sitting at a dinner table. A man in a suit holding a glass mid-toast. A little girl in pigtails clutching a teddy bear. Every single one of them motionless, pale, and coated in a thin layer of wax-like shine. The officer whispered to his partner, "They look real." His partner leaned closer to one of the figures and stepped back suddenly, his face draining of color. "That's because they are real." The house became known as the Mannequin House of Detroit, a place where real people were found frozen in time. No one knew how long they'd been there or why their bodies looked so lifelike. The scene was so perfect, so disturbingly human, it was as if someone had pressed pause on life itself. But the worst part wasn't what they saw, it was what they heard next. Somewhere upstairs, a faint scraping sound echoed, slow and steady, like footsteps dragging across the wooden floor. Months before that night, the house was just another forgotten building in Detroit's west side. Neighbors said it had been empty for years, though sometimes lights flickered on late at night. Teenagers dared each other to go inside, but most never made it past the front porch. It was said that whoever entered could hear whispers, voices talking, laughing, or crying softly in the dark. Some called it a haunted house, others thought it was just an urban legend. But for Emily Carter, a 26-year-old art student from Wayne State University, it was an opportunity. She had heard the stories too, but she didn't believe in ghosts. Her senior project was about urban decay and the beauty of forgotten spaces. So, one afternoon in late September, she packed her camera, flashlight, and sketchbook, and drove to the old house on Elmhurst. The front gate hung loose on one hinge, and vines crawled up the porch like green veins gripping the wood. She pushed open the door and it groaned like something alive. Inside, the air was cold even though it was still warm outside. The living room was covered in dust, but it was neat, too neat. Furniture sat perfectly arranged as if waiting for guests. A cup of tea sat on the coffee table, but when Emily touched it, it crumbled to dust. She took photos of the wallpaper peeling like dry skin, the faded portraits on the walls, and the staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. She thought it was beautiful in a sad kind of way. Then she found the first mannequin. It stood in the corner of the dining room, a tall man in a gray suit, head tilted slightly to one side. Its glass eyes reflected her flashlight. At first, she thought it was part of some forgotten art installation. Then she noticed something strange. Under the collar, where the paint had chipped away, there was skin. Real skin. Emily stumbled back, heart pounding. She snapped a photo and tried to tell herself it was just a wax figure. Maybe the house had belonged to a sculptor. But the deeper she went, the more mannequins she found, in the kitchen, the hallway, even the bathroom. A woman brushing her hair. A man reading a newspaper. A teenage boy holding a football. All frozen mid-action, all terrifyingly real. She decided to leave. As she turned toward the door, her camera flashed one last time, and caught something behind her in the mirror. A figure standing in the doorway of the next room. She spun around, but no one was there. The air grew heavier, colder. Then came a sound, a soft creak, like a footstep on an old wooden floor. Emily's flashlight flickered. She whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Only silence. Then another sound, this time closer. She lifted her flashlight and saw one of the mannequins, the woman with the brush, now facing a different direction. Emily's breath caught. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the light. The mannequin's head was now turned toward her. She ran. Down the hall, through the front door and into the daylight, gasping for air. She didn't stop until she reached her car. When she looked back at the house, she saw something move in the upstairs window, a shadow shaped like a man watching her leave. 2 days later, when she showed the photos to her professor, he frowned. "These are incredible, Emily," he said, flipping through them. Then he stopped at one picture, the one of the mirror. His eyes narrowed. "Who's this man standing behind you?" Emily blinked. "What man?" When she looked again, her stomach dropped. There was someone in the photo. A tall man with pale skin, dark eyes, and a faint smile, standing right behind her shoulder in the reflection. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the house, about the man in the picture. Around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. A notification from her camera app, new photo added. But she hadn't taken any pictures. When she opened it, she screamed. It was another photo from inside the house. This time she was in it, only she wasn't moving. She was standing in the corner of the room, eyes wide open, completely still, like a mannequin. And then, from somewhere inside her apartment, she heard the floor creak. Emily's scream echoed through the empty apartment, bouncing off the walls until it faded into silence. Her hands trembled as she dropped her phone, the screen cracking as it hit the floor. For a long moment she just stared at the broken glass, heart hammering so loudly it drowned out every other sound. Then, there it was again. That same slow creak of the floorboard, coming from the hallway outside her bedroom. She grabbed her flashlight, the same one she'd used inside the mannequin house, and aimed it toward the door. The beam of light shook as she whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint sound of something dragging, like bare feet scraping across the carpet. She backed up against the wall, trying to convince herself it was just her imagination or maybe a neighbor. But when she looked toward the dark hallway again, she swore she saw a shape standing there, tall, unmoving, and too still to be human. Her phone buzzed again, startling her. A new notification popped up on the cracked screen. Photo uploaded, Elmhurst House. She hadn't uploaded anything. She hadn't even gone back. With trembling fingers, she opened her gallery. The picture showed her apartment, the same hallway she was staring at, but with one difference. In the photo, a man stood in the middle of the hall, half in shadow, his head tilted in that same unnatural way she'd seen in the mannequins. Emily dropped the phone again and bolted for the door. She didn't even bother with shoes. She ran down 3 flights of stairs, out the main door and into the street, gasping for air. She spent the night in her car, too afraid to go back inside. When morning came, she told herself she was done with the house, done with her project. She'd delete the photos, transfer to another class, whatever it took. But deep down she knew it wasn't over. Over the next few days, strange things kept happening. When she looked in the mirror, she sometimes thought she saw someone standing behind her. Her reflection seemed delayed, blinking half a second too late. Her friends noticed she'd gone pale, distracted. Her professor tried calling her, but she ignored him. She just wanted to forget. But on Friday morning, she woke to find something outside her apartment door. A small cardboard box with no name or address. Inside was an old Polaroid photo. It showed her standing in front of the mannequin house, smiling. Only, she didn't remember anyone taking it. Behind her, in the doorway of the house, the same pale man watched her from the shadows. Scrawled on the back of the photo in faded ink were 3 words, "Come back home." Emily tried to throw the photo away, but her hand froze halfway to the trash can. It was as if something inside her refused to let go. That night she sat on her couch staring at the picture until she finally whispered, "I'll go back, just one last time." The next morning she drove to the Elmhurst house. The streets were empty, the sky gray and heavy like it knew something she didn't. The house looked worse now, boarded windows, police tape flapping in the wind, but still standing like it was waiting for her. She ducked under the tape and stepped inside. The air was colder than before, heavy with that same strange scent, perfume, wax, and rot. The mannequins were still there, all of them in the same positions. The man at the table. The woman brushing her hair. The little girl with her teddy bear. Emily whispered, "Why me?" But the only reply was the faint hum of the wind through broken glass. She lifted her camera again, hands shaking, and began to take pictures. 1 flash. 2. Then, something strange. When the 3rd flash went off, one of the mannequin's eyes seemed to move just slightly. She froze, staring. It didn't move again. She told herself it was a trick of the light. She continued up the stairs. The wooden steps creaked beneath her feet, each one louder than the last. At the top, she found a hallway lined with old portraits, black and white photos of families from decades ago. But as she looked closer, her stomach turned. The faces in the photos weren't still images anymore. Their eyes seemed to shift, following her as she moved. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, looked again. The faces were still staring. Every single one of them. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely. She hit it against her hand, but it didn't come back on. Then came the whisper, faint, almost like wind at first, but growing clearer. "Stay with us." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Who's there?" she whispered. The whisper came again, this time from behind her. "Stay." She spun around and saw movement, slow, jerky, unnatural. One of the mannequins was at the top of the stairs, its head turning inch by inch toward her. Its glass eyes gleamed in the dark. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall. More footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy, dragging footsteps. The mannequins were moving now, their stiff limbs bending in unnatural ways, their faces blank and lifeless but somehow alive. Emily screamed and ran into a bedroom at the end of the hall, slamming the door behind her. She pushed a dresser in front of it and backed away, breathing hard. Then she saw something that made her knees buckle. On the bed lay a new mannequin, wearing her clothes, her hair tied the same way, her eyes half open. It looked exactly like her. On the nightstand beside it was her phone, the same cracked screen, showing a single message, "Welcome home." Before she could react, the door behind her creaked open, slowly as if by invisible hands, and the shadows began to move. Emily backed into the corner, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls closing in as the mannequin's shadows stretched across the floor. The one that looked exactly like her lay motionless on the bed, its glassy eyes staring up at the ceiling. But the longer she looked, the more she swore she could see its chest rise, just slightly, as if it were breathing. The door, which she'd pushed the dresser against, was now wide open. She hadn't heard it move. Cold air swept into the room, carrying a faint humming sound, a tune that was both eerie and oddly familiar. It was the same melody she'd heard faintly on her first visit to the house, a woman's voice humming just out of sight. Emily whispered to herself, "This isn't real, this isn't real." But when she turned back toward the bed, her mannequin double was sitting upright, its head tilted toward her, smiling. Emily screamed and grabbed her camera, snapping photos wildly as she stumbled toward the door. Each flash lit up the room for a split second, and each time the mannequin was closer. The fourth flash went off just inches from its face, and the photo burned white in her camera before the battery died completely. She threw the camera to the floor and ran into the hallway. The lights flickered as she ran, her footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silence. The mannequins she'd seen earlier were gone from their places. The table was empty, the woman with the hairbrush no longer by the mirror. "Where are they?" she whispered. Then she heard it, footsteps behind her this time. She didn't dare look back. She rushed down the stairs and nearly tripped at the bottom, catching herself on the old banister. When she looked up, she froze. The mannequins were all there, standing in a circle in the living room, surrounding the dining table like before. Only this time there was a new figure among them. A tall man in a black suit, his pale skin stretched tight across his face, and his eyes, deep, hollow yet aware. He turned his head slowly toward her. Emily felt her body go cold. It was the same man from the photo. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice soft but heavy, echoing through the empty house. Emily's knees weakened, but she forced herself to speak. "What are you? What do you want from me?" He smiled, though it didn't look human. "I preserve what time forgets. Those who enter this house, they never leave. They become part of my collection." Emily shook her head. "No, you're lying. They're just mannequins. They're not real." "Look closer," he whispered. And she did. Her flashlight beam swept over the faces around the table, and for the first time she saw it clearly. Every single mannequin had tiny scars along the hairline, faint bruises around the neck, veins visible beneath the waxy coating. Their eyes weren't glass, they were real eyes, cloudy and lifeless. Emily stumbled back, gagging. No, this isn't possible." The man took a step closer, his voice almost kind. "You came to capture beauty in decay. Now you'll never have to leave it." Emily turned and ran for the door, but when she grabbed the handle, it wouldn't budge. The locks had fused together, the metal twisting like melted plastic. She slammed her fists against the door. "Help. Somebody please?" But her voice was swallowed by the silence. Behind her, the mannequins began to move, slowly, deliberately, turning their heads toward her one by one. Their movements were stiff, but their eyes followed her every motion. The man in the black suit stood in the middle of them, watching. "They all tried to run," he said calmly. "But time doesn't run here." Emily spotted a window and rushed toward it, throwing her weight against the glass. It cracked but didn't break. Again. Harder. The third time it shattered, and cold wind rushed in. She climbed halfway out before something cold and hard grabbed her ankle. She screamed and kicked, looking down to see a pale hand gripping her leg. The mannequin that looked like her was pulling her back inside. "Let me go," she screamed, kicking again. She broke free, falling out the window and hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through her side, but she forced herself up. She didn't look back. She ran to her car, gasping, fumbling for her keys. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. She sped away, tears blurring her vision. By the time she reached the city, the sun was rising. She pulled over and stared at herself in the rearview mirror. Her reflection